Chris, South Park Bushcraft, here at Maine Primitive Skills School, taking the students around on the landscape, showing them where they can find natural springs so they can collect water if they're ever in a situation. Kind of giving them just pointers on what to look for, what kind of characteristics the land will show you and tell you that, hey, there's some water there. And you can take that water in a situation, whether it's winter, summer, any time of the year, it'll be there.
You notice as we kind of move down here, the trees get a little bit denser, and in the summer when I do this, I say, hey, look at all the moss that's growing on the ground, because right about here there starts to be a lot of moss in between the trees. And notice how the slope of the terrain starts to change. It's no longer as steep a slope, it kind of goes into a more flat area. And if you look right over here, you'll notice there's a little bit of a gully, or a little bit of a miniature valley. So the intersection of the slope area and the flat area, that little intersection point, is where a spring, one type of spring, is likely to occur. And in this example, we do have a little spring. The spring actually isn't there, it's actually right here. Whatever, thousands of years, how it has created a little depression. So if you're walking in the landscape and you see that erosion feature, follow it upstream until you hit the top where the spring might be. And you might not see it, right? This could be a lot more debris here, it could be trees growing here, and you might not see anything. You might have to dig down a little bit, and then you'll see the water will start to drift in.
Ooh.
We feel it's good enough to drink, so I'm going to drink some. I'm not saying you should, I'm not saying everyone would be safe drinking it. People have different immune systems. And when you do find a spring, or you are wondering whether it's a reasonable spring to drink, some of the things to look for is that the vegetation around it, is it healthy vegetation? Obviously if the water is clear. Sometimes in Maine, though, the water is tannin rich, which usually means there's a bog above it, which usually means it's not a spring. So that's often a sign that the water may be polluted, because beavers and stuff like to hang out in boggy areas, and all kinds of rodents are running around pooping in it. So often if it's tannin rich, brown colored, it's not that it's like polluted, but it may have tannins and potentially be contaminated with bacterial contaminants. If there's a lot of dense vegetation around the spring, sometimes that will mean that animals are hiding in there or using that, and then they could be pooping in the water. Oftentimes springs are used by animals to drink from if they're nice. So you'll see maybe animal trails. Maybe it's not a good idea to get it right there. You might want to go upstream if you can a little bit from where the animals are drinking, because they might be walking through it and leaving stuff behind, Having said that, there's also a level of personal adaptability that you can develop. I was hiking on a trail years ago, and I saw, I got my little water filter, and I'm down there, pumping water into my Nalgene, and this old dude comes up, takes his his bottle and dips it right in and starts sucking it down. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, are you worried about Giardia and stuff? He's like, no. I grew up on a farm. We drank from the creek, so he's a carrier of Giardia and maybe other things. But it doesn't bother him anymore. Maybe when he was a kid he got the diarrhea all the time or something. But he's adapted. His body has adapted. So, like I said, just because one person can drink it doesn't mean that anyone can.
Well, Giardia, if you get the same, you can't get the same strain of it twice. And there's 17 different strains. If you get like 6 of them, you can't get that same one. More than once.
But so there's three kinds of levels of water that people utilize, right? You have like surface water, right? Like what this is. Could be lakes, streams, all that kind of stuff, right? Probably the most likely to be contaminated. It's also one of the most likely places that certain chemicals that float, like petrochemicals, will be hanging out. Then you have springs, which is that intersection between the water table and the surface. And then you have, groundwater, water that's underground, which like all the wells and stuff are utilizing. Some chemical contaminants will float in the water table, which means they'll end up in the spring. They'll be coming out in the spring because that's the top of the water table. Some contaminants free float around in the water table, and some sink in the water table. So you have all these different contaminants that kind of separate depending on their density and stuff in the groundwater. So, and some of them break down over time, some don't. So I don't know all the details of that, but it's worth looking into if you're drinking from a well or you're drinking from a spring, to test the water and see what kind of, like, obviously heavy metals, they sink. So if you have a deep well, you're more likely to get heavy metals than a spring. A spring, you're more likely to get like the floaty, like acetone, like the solvents and things like that, weird stuff like that. It's like, so that's what you gotta be cautious for in springs or open wells, like top wells that are near the surface of the water table. Wells can be at all different levels of the water table. And you can also see that we have like a pipe in there. So we actually use water from the spring, and I pipe it all the way over there and use it at my shelter, which is over there, and we have another instructor shelter that no one's using right now. Another pipe runs that way. So we actually have running hose, tap water, so to speak, from the spring, so I can do my dishes and take a bath and drink that water over there. It also helps, rather than coming here and walking a bunch of times over the water, carrying water around, and potentially contaminating the water. It's better to run it somewhere else than use it. So I can just take my dishes and just dump the water wherever, because I'm not dumping it. We want to protect our water, so we're not washing dishes in the creek, right? We're taking the water somewhere else. So if we didn't have the piping, we used to take a bucket, move the water, and do it like over there, at least a few feet away. So separate that.